There were around 1 million registered overseas Filipinos who did not get to vote in the 2025 midterm elections. The Commission on Elections, or COMELEC, overhauled its overseas voting system in a bid to increase turnout from the record high 40% in 2022. For the first time, it implemented an internet voting system for overseas Filipinos. This system intended to make it easier to vote, especially for Filipino workers who lived or worked far away from Philippine embassies and consulates. But instead of more Filipinos coming out to vote, only 18.12% cast their votes via the internet voting system. This is just 221,000 out of the expected 1.22 million. How did this happen? Hello, I'm Michelle Abad, and welcome to At Home sa Abroad, Rappler's one-stop show for everything related to the Filipino diaspora. Here we discuss topics important to Filipinos all over the world, from concerns and welfare of overseas Filipino workers to celebrating Pinoy success stories and reconnecting with cultural roots at iba pa. For this episode, we sit down with Ronnette Sanchez, Education Officer of Malaya Movement Seattle. Ronnette is part of the many migrant rights organizations who help their local Filipino communities navigate the new voting system. She is also one of the 178,000 voters based in the United States. Net, welcome to the show.
Hi. Hello, Michelle. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming to the show. And so, yeah, I just really want to get the ball rolling a little bit on this particular election. So, or before this particular election, actually, how politically engaged was your community? Like, were they active in previous elections?
Yeah. So, just for a little context, tumira ako sa Philippines for up until finishing college, up until 2018. So I hadn't had moved to Seattle until like late 2018. So the election that I was able to see overseas was the 2022 election, the most recent one with the presidential election. And that's actually how I got engaged in my community in the first place, in the Filipino community here in Seattle, because it was such an important election to the Filipino community. And of course, you know, it being a presidential election, it being the election where a Marcos would possibly come back into power. It was very active in terms of the organizing, intergenerational events. Really, people at the time trying to support Lenny Robredo, and so I did see a lot of political activity, and through that engagement, joined Malaya Seattle shortly after.
Okay. And like, were you able to see like a lot of people come out at that time? Like, were they really motivated to cast their votes at the time? Like, just curious as well.
Yeah. So for me at the time, I actually personally wasn't a registered voter. That being because of the, you know, having to register before a certain period of time or a deadline, and I didn't make that cutoff for that election. But we saw people flyering in predominantly Filipino spaces, like Filipino grocery stores, malls, places where Filipinos would gather, and really trying to motivate the community to see the importance of the election. And I think that probably contributed to the high turnout that we saw. I know in other areas too in the US, many people were out in the streets holding rallies and community gatherings in order to really discuss the importance of the elections for even us overseas Filipinos.
Okay. So just for our viewers context as well, like before this election with the 2025 internet voting, the traditional modes back then were personal voting. So that was when Filipinos would line up at the embassies and consulates to fill out ballots and put them into automated counting machines, just like they did before. And then there was the postal mode as well, where the Filipinos would get their ballots in the mail and then they would bring them back. So now, like, it's a big shift, right? Like only very few posts were had to be implementing that kind of mode, the personal and postal, and the majority or almost all of overseas registered voters had to do internet voting. So I was wondering, like, since it's a big shift and like it just happened like right away for this election, when did you find out that the 2025 election was going to be conducted with internet voting, and how did your community feel about the shift?
Right. Yeah. So for me, it was actually um, after after the registration period that I found out about the online voting, and that it was purely online. I think really when I started to see information about it is when people started talking about enrollment. And that was, I would like to say, between a month to 2 months before the actual election day. So really not a lot of time to be ramping up that information, especially in the communities. And like to the point of the actual voting day, there have been people who did not know up until that point that they would not be receiving a ballot and they would not be engaging in voting the same way that they did and they were used to for many, many elections before. So that was frustrating in many ways leading up to voting as we had to navigate a new system. Um, at the beginning of it, there was a link that we had to click on to enroll, but that wasn't working for at least like a couple days to a week. And people were asking where the link was. And, there are these expectations of us as voters to follow a certain system in order to opt in to this new system. But there had been a lot of technical difficulties and grievances that had made it more difficult in actually being able to engage and the community in experiencing that too in our voter outreaches as members of the community. It had also been or impacted the way that people wanted to participate in elections this midterm elections.
Yeah, we'll get to the technical hiccups
Mhm.
later on in a bit, but then I think it's really notable how like even like Filipino community leaders were like found out about the big shift like pretty late in the game, like after, like for you in your case it was after the registration period after September 30. And like even for me in my context, I knew that there were talks about internet voting and that they
Mhm.
had decided to do it like before when we were following the election, like the commission on elections talks. But then personally, as a reporter who covers migrants rights, like the first time I saw a like a piece of information dissemination about the online voting system that was targeted for voters was in January this year. So that
Mhm.
was the first time that I saw that, oh, it's actually happening, like it's in full
Mhm.
swing. And then so it's interesting that Filipino community leaders and like even journalists who might be covering this did not see information campaigns until very late in the game. So yeah,
Mhm.
since you started talking about the pre-enrollment period and the technical difficulties, like how was that for you? Like since you found out later on in the game, like how did you navigate that? How were you able to like assist your community during the pre-enrollment period?
Yeah, so I think I guess like in that period, thankfully it was not short. I think we were given at least a month. And then it got extended more and more because of the lack of enrollments that we were seeing. But at that point, it's kind of late. But in really, yeah, just trying to have that available to our community in order for them to exercise their rights. It's one thing to, have um, like information posted on social media, and versus like having an actual like in-person clinic that you could engage face to face with people, especially those in the older generation who aren't as tech savvy, um, to really try to go through those hurdles together in order to exercise our democratic rights. And so, really, in the lead up in the enrollment period, we're also trying to see like what is it that um, the consulate or the embassies or the entities here that are supporting the elections. What are they doing to reach out to the community? And I've had experiences of not really getting email updates as a registered voter about town halls that are happening. And it's actually really unfortunate to see that for Washington under the consulate in San Francisco, that out of close to 45,000 registered voters under that consulate, when hosting a town hall for its constituents, only 18 people showed up. And I think that points to really the lack of information and dissemination, just lack of engagement in general with, let's say, the consulates and the actual constituents. And so it really falls on to community organizations to kind of fill that gap. Whereas, we aren't as resourced. We do this for free in our free time. We have our own jobs. But the effort to outreach in order to engage our communities was there from community organizations and not really seen through the efforts of the consulate, even if they did have like consular outreaches. Since there isn't an actual consulate here in Washington, it was very lacking in terms of the on the ground outreach.
I'm actually curious about like the context of like how like close I would say like how close the San Francisco consulate is with like its jurisdictions because like to put it into context I also covered the start of the overseas election in Singapore where they also did internet voting and like their assessment there was that they were kind of able to better facilitate information dissemination there because like they're kind of close as a Filipino community with the consulate and they're just they're one island, right?
Yeah.
But then like there like in the background of or like before this election, like how often would you say like for example did the consulate engage with the community and like how did this type of relationship like lead up to where they were lacking in the information dissemination?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, just to give a little bit more context for the viewers as well, the San Francisco consulate um, is servicing many different states, not just California, like Alaska, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and several others, where that amount of Filipino constituents are under one consulate. And this has been a grievance for a while now, especially considering the amount of Filipinos in Seattle, but also like the amount of Filipinos that go through Washington to go to Alaska to work in the canneries, the farming as well, and just noticing how for our community, we really needed more consular services and those outreaches. We would often see maybe once, twice, at most 3 times in a year that the consulate will be on wheels and they'll come for several days and have appointments, which have also had some grievances as well in securing appointments and just being able to have services. People would walk up from Alaska not knowing if they would actually get an appointment and waiting for hours and hours. People would have to like not go to their jobs because although they have like windows of time for their appointments, it has been a challenge as well. And we've seen difficulty with the timeliness as well. There has been talks about a consulate being established here in Washington State, but yet to be seen. And it's just been something that in terms of services in general, not even just registering to vote, it's something that has been lacking for the Filipino community here as well. Sometimes people aren't able to go back home for so long because it's either they miss the times that the consulate is here, they can't afford to go to San Francisco. It's such a logistical hurdle, and I think that really directly correlates to with the engagement the consulate has with community here as well. And even when they are here, they really do rely on community organizations in our state, for example, to be the ones that are the manpower of their consular outreaches as well, volunteers. So really seeing like the lack of investment in time and resources in order to serve really the kababayan here in Washington.
Yeah. So we're really seeing like how like the different layers of the problem come together, right? So like it's like we what we might call like a lacking relationship between the consulate and the community, and then we have like this whole new system that like they had to introduce and like make people realize that they had to do so that they would be able to vote in the election, right? So that's, you know, an overlapping problem. And so like you so let's go back now to the actual voting period, and like you were
Mhm.
talking about like the technical issues. Like
Yeah.
you as a voter, maybe let's start with your story as a voter. Like how was it like for you, and then what was it like to also help your community in enrolling in the system and casting their vote?
Yeah. So, I realized ko I've been speaking in English the whole time. But
Okay
yeah,
lang yan.
yeah. Yeah, I am a voter. First time actually that I was able to vote in elections. Previously, I've had trouble with like the registration periods and like moving around what it means to like be registered to a consulate and such. But this year was able to do it. And as a voter, the enrollment period, I think what was hard for me was really the dissemination of information, like it not being really accessible, not really having the emails or the updates. And if it wasn't from my like own um, drive to find out, it would have been hard. And I think that's a hang up for a lot of Filipinos as well. It's like, it's not a priority in the mind because people aren't aware. So there's like a real like lapse in that. What has been done in order to get people engaged in the elections in the first place. And then also for my voting experience, um, experience, I don't have the prior knowledge of what it was like to receive ballots in the mail. Though I was engaged in the 2022 elections, I heard there were issues in itself with that system too, in like sending out ballots, in receiving them in like the wrong address and things like that, not having updated information in order to ensure that people would get their materials. And then yeah, what the deadlines, clearly outlining the deadlines for your vote to be casted. But I guess in now, with the online voting, different beast, especially with um, the enrollment, you had to go through a certain process. And I know that like folks were having a lot of trouble, especially when it came to the requirements in enrolling. Luckily for me, I had just renewed my Philippine passport when I had registered in the first place. And so the actual enrollment process was not too bad for myself. But in hearing the grievances of the community and not knowing that they needed to have certain documents, or not knowing that um, they had to enroll in the first place. So the lack of awareness, but also like the misinformation as well when it came to what was required in order to enroll was also a pain point or a hiccup. Tapos, in the actual voting itself, you have to go through many, many names, many, many names of senators and of party lists. And because it's online voting, you don't have to go through the, you know, um, local elections, like for your province or city and stuff like that. So those were the only two things that really on my experience was being asked to vote on. Kaso, the time limit is also something that was a grievance in like going through. Um, and like if people are really trying to discern still their votes, it's really pressuring to make sure you put in your votes the right way, double check, and then see it all through. So that's also like especially if you're having technical difficulties as well or not too tech savvy. That's a hang up. And then also like the fact that you are told as you're voting that you will be able to review your uh your votes, your casted ballot, and then there being like this code encryption, QR code doesn't really show you who you voted. There was a lot of like um, grief also coming out of that, and like not knowing if it was uh, like verified correctly, or just having general distrust in this new system by way that like it was showing it would tell you one thing, pero like at the end of it, like it'll show you something that makes you kind of question, and a lot of confidence in the system was also lost, in my experience with our community in that kind of setup.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because like, and on that note, on the code that comes out, because like,
Yeah.
I also talked to like this election watchdog Namfrel, and then they were assessing like, that code and this the expectation that it was setting, right? Because like,
Yeah.
the Comelec explained that it's normal, it's like that. You're not supposed to see the whole ballot because
Yeah.
it might be pictured or
Mhm.
screenshotted for like vote buying and stuff like
Yeah.
that, which is like, okay, the explanation kind of checks out, but then also at the same time, it's like the system told you that you could review your ballot, so you expect to see your ballot. And
Mm-hmm.
then like, it could have just said something like, click here to confirm that your ballot was sent, right? At least you
Mm-hmm.
won't expect that you're gonna see the
Yeah.
ballot. So that really caused some confusion. And like,
Yeah.
and there were lots of like Facebook posts also about how they were warning that this was that there was something rigged in the system. Did the community also like come across those posts, and like what happened there? Like, did it sow any fear or distrust?
Yeah, I think in general too, like part of it is also like the distrust um in elections in general. I think there has been like this sentiment about like people's votes not mattering, or being overseas, and um it's not like uh overseas concerns are being addressed as well. We see Filipinos leave everything that they have, their families, their loved ones, and it's a hard thing to do. No, it's um, and you want to go back home to the Philippines. Most people I know here want to go back home and want to be with their families and want to um, be able to participate in the Philippines' development. Pero that kind of sowing of distrust and not really prioritizing the sentiments of overseas Filipinos, when in fact we are called heroes for doing what we do, and our own contributions to the economy. It's it's just shameful as well, like the neglect that we've seen in terms of this process and really being able to engage people. And people see that, and it makes them, one, not want to engage, two, like the system of like the complicated system makes another hurdle for engagement, and then three, like in this new like electronic internet voting system, people not wanting to engage with us as community organizers trying to help them because they think that in this electronic process that we're helping to try to walk them through, that their vote will not be counted in the way that they had intended.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think Malaya recently had like a town hall, right? I'm sure like these sentiments that you were just talking about came out, but like were there others? Like what else was the community saying? Like it was after the election, so like we knew about the turnout at that point, and it was
Yeah.
really bad, despite the Comelec's effort to try and increase it. So like, what was the town hall like?
Yeah. So, you know, the town hall, we were really trying to, not so much like wallow in despair, because there's a lot of work to be done still, whether or not the elections go the way we want or not. Of course, there were celebrations in the fact that we did have more progressive candidates that were just all overall in the election period representing an alternative platform or a better way to um, go about the changes needed in our country. And that in itself was a win. Folks like more progressive folks like Bam and Kiko and the Akbayan Party list, those were victories. Mayor Lenny and Naga, those were victories for sure. But I think the town hall was really trying to bring the overseas Filipino voices to the forefront. It was titled Mahalaga ang Boses Mo. So really trying to instill the importance, even though we saw in this past midterm elections that, 5.2% overseas, more than 1 million disenfranchised, is not really telling of the importance that the consulate or the Philippine government has on the voices of our migrant Filipinos. And so it's really a point of coming together and thinking na if the Philippine government won't do it, then we can. Like, edi kami na lang. Like, that sentiment came up, really trying to engage the community. Although elections might be one way to see change in our society or in the Philippines, as organizers, we really do believe that the coming together and forming the networks. Like, I'm not sure if you've heard of like Tanggol Migrante, which is a local network that's being built as well. We're trying to also like gather people to address the concerns of our migrant Filipinos that are being detained and neglected by the Philippine government by really putting into the forefront their issues, amplifying them, and being alongside them and with them. And so, like, the event was also important to really inspire people to push forward and to continue the work that is needed, that our government officials aren't doing and aren't engaging with us on the ground.
Mhm. Okay. And maybe just to like wrap up the discussion on the election and like assessing how this internet voting system didn't work out the way that we would hope that it had to. Like, what do you think could be improved like for the next time to help more Filipinos abroad vote? Like, do you think that this internet voting system can work if some things were changed, or like do you think the Comelec should just consider reverting the system to how it was before with the personal and postal modes?
Mhm. Yeah. I think ultimately, the genuine care and involvement is what's needed. Really being able to see the effort that if we're going to overhaul this system, anong kailangan gawin para ma-engage yung mga voters natin? Anong kailangan gawin para mas mapadami ang registrants overseas? Anong kailangan namin gawin para ma-ensure na ang ganitong technology, ang like different totally different system, maintindihan ng mga voters. Like, especially thinking about those who have gotten used to a certain way. Like, it doesn't need just uh, social media posts or Zoom calls or like, it needs an entire concerted effort na talagang makikita mo kung saan napupunta yung budget nila, right? That's, you will see really how they choose to care about the information and ability of people to vote by the efforts that they show. So sana naman in the next elections we see more of that, um, like conversation, in really trying to engage the people in what they think is the right way to approach it. I know personally that in our efforts in talking to people, um, some form of hybrid voting system is really what people are pushing for, because the total overhaul really made it so that, with coupling with the lack of information and coupling with the lack of on the ground presence, it was doomed to fail. It was doomed to fail. So really needing that effort, that uh, really concerned, showing your true concern as the Philippine government for your Philippine nationals to allow them to really exercise their democratic right.
Okay, I think we can end on that note. Thank you, Nat, for your time.
Oh, thank you so much, Michelle.
And to our viewers, if you would like to share your thoughts on overseas voting, download the Rappler Communities app and let's continue the conversation in the Overseas Filipinos channel. Again, you're tuned into At Home to Abroad on Rappler. I'm Michelle Abad. Thank you for listening.